Good evening once again. This is the Ellen Dailey Advocacy Committee, a committee of the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council and the National Consumer Advisory Board. We would like to extend a hearty welcome to each and every one of you for being here on today. The name of this event is called During These Times. Without giving away too much, we just want to take a closer look. Our theme for this year has been one on different segments regarding self-care. And this one will also be speaking to that particular topic of interest. We only ask that everyone would behave in courteous manner. A little housekeeping stuff is that keep your mic closed if you would, and mute it whenever you're not speaking. And after that, we'll just sit back and relax and be informed. Today, we have two dynamic individuals who have agreed to present here on the topic, and we'll let each one come in its own way. First of all, we have Alfred Green. Alfred Green is the founder of Reveal to Heal. He quit his job in 2015 to walk the streets to help God's people. Fashion has saved Alfred's life and gave it a sense of purpose. After feeding the unhoused, he discovered there were some amazing gifts that slept under the bridges. As a result, he started a fashion show called Dress Like You, whereby he restored clients' dignity by giving them a full transformation. As a result, there were some amazing gifts breathed back to life. In the middle of the pandemic, Alfred found himself homeless. He then had to utilize some of the same services he walked the streets and communities telling others about. With lived experience, his goal is to change the face of the homeless, utilizing every gift God's entrusted him with aspirations to run a 24/7 state-of-the-art facility that caters to every need of the individuals he's been called to serve. Alfred realizes the demand is not just in his local city. Giving back is something that he was instilled with during his early childhood. Alfred lives by two mantras. When I become successful, I create opportunities for others to become successful. And his mission in life is to create a world where the reality of dreams exists by transforming the lives of God's people by painting his love over their hearts. Without further ado, I present to you Mr. Alfred Green.
This meeting is being recorded.
Wow, thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, it's both an honor and a privilege to be able to share today. And again, thank you, Charlotte, for presenting this opportunity. And as I indicated in the chat, I'm absolutely looking forward to working with you all in some sort of capacity, even though we may not be in the same city. I believe that what I'm called to do and my life purpose is really connecting with other individuals. And like I said, just because we're not in the same city doesn't mean that we won't work together. And so, again, I'm truly grateful for this opportunity, Miss Charlotte. And again, thank you for that. I had forgot that you had that little piece. And so that really took out a lot of my talking time today, because I was like, what am I going to say? What am I going to share? But I know we're talking about self-care. But even before we get to talking about self-care, you heard Miss Charlotte just give you just a brief bio of what I've been called to do. And so I feel it's equally important for me to set the stage and give a little context as I begin to talk about self-care and what that means to me in this era. And so even before God asked me to quit my job and walk the streets to help people, I was an individual who came from a place of a lot of pain, a lot of trauma. And I don't mind sharing these things, because I believe there may be somebody in the room. Your story may not be like my story, but we may have some parallel similarities in where we come from and how we were raised, and realizing how we were raised, how that shapes how we deal with individuals on a day-to-day basis. And so at the age of 5, I was ran over by a car. At that same age, I was molested, which ushered in homosexuality. And I lived my life for 30 years as a Black gay male. During that time, I contracted HIV. My dad wasn't in my life. My mom was there, but she wasn't there. And so I've wrestled with suicidal thoughts, depression, hopelessness, and all of that. And I look at it like this. I'm grateful for it now, because I realized what God was doing was building something on the inside of me that would be relatable to the people that I've been called to serve. Because as I sat in alleyways talking to individuals and just listening to their story, I realized regardless of how we arose at that particular point, whether they lived on the streets or whether I drove up there and met them, we all came from a place of pain. That was our common denominator that we had, was because life had absolutely been lifing. And some people are able to bounce back from life happening, and while others they stay stuck a little longer. And so as I began to just really walk the streets and really listening to people, I realized God was trying to birth a nonprofit in me. And so I never really knew what a nonprofit organization was. Even at the tender age of 43, I didn't know what a nonprofit was. And so he sent me to work at a nonprofit. And it was the most fulfilling thing that I've ever done in my life, because I had an opportunity to do what I love most, which was help people, give back to people, serve other people, give them some directions as relates to their life based on the services that we offered at the nonprofit. And so it was a life-changing job for me, because it taught me two things. It taught me how to successfully run a nonprofit, and it taught me what not to do. And even though I loved that job, and I was employee of the month and employee of the year, I got fired from that job, because when you have a heart to serve and you realize that the people are being hurt by a program, it causes you to say some things that you normally wouldn't say. And so I just walked right into the CEO's office. I said, "Y'all don't care nothing about these people coming to this program." And 7 days later, I was fired. And so when I was fired, God opened up a door for me to have my own shop, and it was a successful business. We were still in the community, connecting people with resources that they need to live this thing called life, and just really, really successful. And then I found myself homeless. And even though I was sleeping at the shop and I had supported family members and I was sleeping on their couch, I had to tap into, like Miss Charlotte said, the same programs or the same entities and organizations that I was giving other people. I had to go stand in line and sleep outside at the Beacon so I could make sure that I was the first one served in line on that day. And so I went through the program, and what I discovered in that program was they had a cookie cutter approach. And it's not like I presented myself or I thought of myself higher than other people that were in the same situation. I just knew that I wasn't going to just live anywhere because someone was paying my rent. You can call it ungrateful. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but I just know that God didn't call me to settle for anything in life. And so I went and I found some apartment complexes that would accept the program that the other programs did not have on their list. And so I'm telling my case manager, "Hey, there's a whole bunch of other complexes that are on this list that need to be on a list, because you need to be able to serve a whole lot of people." And so I've been in this place. They paid the apartment for a year. During that time, right at the end, when they got through paying for my apartment, I had to close the shop. And I didn't have to close the shop because it was suffering financially. I had to close the shop for other reasons. And when the shop closed, there seemed to be a domino effect. Um, about a year later, my telephone number got disconnected. And I've had this number since 2015. And it got disconnected. And I said, okay, well, I wasn't really tripping about that, because I really started to begin to really chase, and not even really chase, just really realize that there were some things that I needed to work on in order to be a whole person. Because even though I was effective and the things that I was doing in the community, that I was dysfunctional at the same time, because there was still some trauma from childhood that I carried around with me, but I was still being able to impact the lives of other people. And so my telephone number got turned off. And so I really wasn't tripping about the phone getting turned off, because I realized in that moment that if God was really working on me and really healing some places, ridding me of some ideals and some concepts that I really began to embrace, then he was really doing something new. because I didn't wake up with the desires that I used to have. And so I said, okay, if God is doing something new in me, then, the phone is the next thing that has to go, because that's how my past was able to get in contact with me, or me reaching back out of my past. And then, uh, my business dried up. In addition to having a resale shop, I also was a person who done interior design. And so I had a nice wide range of clientele, and that business was thriving. So I had the shop, closed that down, and then, started doing interior design more, and that started to thrive. And then that shut down. And then finances started to become a problem because I didn't have anything coming in. And shortly thereafter, my car was repossessed. And again, I wasn't really tripping about my car being repossessed, because 2 weeks before my car was repossessed, God told me to go to the Range Rover dealership, because if that's what I wanted, I needed to go test drive it. I needed to go see it. I needed to go touch it. I needed to go feel it. I needed to go sit in it. And so when I walked outside and my car was gone, I did not trip, because God had already showed me that, hey, I have something else for you. And so I've been in this apartment for 2 years now. The first year was paid for by one of the agencies through the Way Home program, and I'm truly grateful for that. But I'm in the second year, and even though my finances were kind of drying up, um, I didn't have a way to pay my rent. But God sent me some other organizations that kicked in where the other place left out. And so I had to say all of that to say this. Um, I am now, I just went to eviction court on Tuesday, and it's for this place that was paid for by the organization, and all this other kind of good stuff. But I really wasn't tripping even about being in eviction court, because in October, before my lease ended, God told me to pack my bags. And so I'm sitting here in an apartment that's ready to be moved out, because I heard a voice that simply said, pack your bags. And so even sitting in an eviction court, I wasn't concerned about the outcome, because I knew God had something else for me. And so as I sat in eviction court, I took notice of this young guy and his girlfriend, and they were there. And I just knew that I had to say something to this young man, because I just felt like he needed something that God deposited on the inside of me. And so God made a way for me to make this connection. And so now we've been talking every day. And I'm just really sharing with him some of the things that I had to go through, because I realized the life that I live is not necessarily for me, but it's to help other people. And we're getting to self-care. I promise you, we're getting to self-care. And and so I'm sharing with this young man, some of the things, and he calls me Mr. Green. I just tell him, no matter how much I tell him to call me Al, he still calls me Mr. Green. But I understand that I only went through what I had to go through in order to show him another direction, even though we're in the same place. But I know that, and I used to feel like all my life I gotta fight. I felt like Miss Sophia from The Color Purple. All my life I gotta fight. But now, the difference between now and then is I know I'm not fighting alone. And so as it relates to self-care, one of the things that I have done in this season is I really, with all the things that I just named you going now, my phone getting disconnected, my car being repossessed, facing eviction out of this apartment, I realized that a lot of things that I did, how I interacted, or the decisions that I made was still based on some trauma. And so a part of my self-care is I made a decision that I would not carry any more broken pieces from the past into 2024. I was going to sit down and really have an honest conversation with myself and an honest conversation with my creator, just by simply crying out, because I realized that there's so much on the inside of me that he's trying to rid, so he can pour something new into me, so I can be of a greater help to the people that he's called me to serve. And so part of my self-care is simply realizing that even though I was allowed to be used and function in a capacity to help and serve other people, there was still some help that I needed to do. There were still some things that need to be fixed on the inside of me. And so I began to just write down a list of things that I went through, and I listed rejection, I lifted abandonment, I lifted fear, I lifted all those things, because what I realized, and it may resonate with you, everybody in this room has probably gone through something similar that I mentioned, even though our stories are different. And so one thing that we all had to overcome, or maybe still desire, or figuring out how to get it, is our self-identity. I realized that me being molested was a huge part in my identity, because I know I'm called to serve men. And so if I'm sleeping with men, I really can't help them to the fullest capacity that I should, because I have a desire. And so God had to help me with my identity. And then because I was afraid, or fear was birthed into me in a young place, I had to realize that was just a mechanism for the enemy. And I hate to sound like I'm preaching, but I can only tell you what works for me. But I had to realize that fear didn't come from God. It came from something that was really fighting my purpose in life. And so not only that, but the fear also was trying to muzzle my mouth, to keep my mouth closed, because I used to tell myself that there's nothing that I can say that would impact anybody's life. Even though I was doing it on a daily basis, I was tricked to believe that my words didn't have any power, they didn't have any weight, and they certainly wasn't going to change anybody's life, even though daily God was using me to change and impact somebody's life and get their life on a different path. And so self-care and self-efficacy for me was just really having a conversation, an honest conversation about the things that I recognize that I needed to change. Because again, I'm making a commitment not only to myself, but I'm making a commitment to others, to make sure that I can love from a place of wholeness, I can minister from a place of wholeness, and I can serve from a place of wholeness. And what I realized is I was bleeding on individuals who didn't cut me. And so it was imperative that I got into a place that I allowed God to heal all that hurt and all that pain that I carried around for years. Yeah, that I carried around for years, so I could be the best version of myself for the people that He's called me to serve. And I'm just grateful again for this opportunity. And that's what self-care looks like for me. And this season, in lieu of everything that's going on, I still know that God has a purpose. I still know that God has a plan. And I still know that He's not forgotten about me. And the same thing, He's not forgotten about you. And I think our love and our heart to serve other people is what have us commonly brought together on this line to get today, because we can't do the work that we're doing respectively in our communities, both individually and collectively, if you didn't have a heart to serve. And so as I conclude this topic, I just want to read a quote, and it's from Marianne Williamson, and some of y'all may have heard it before. And even before I read that, I'm reading it from a passage of my book. And so self-care and really, really digging into those deep, dark places that I didn't want to. Self-care is birthing a book on the inside of me. And so I'm sitting down to write. And so I'm going to quote you this quote by Marianne Williamson. And it simply says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small does not serve the world. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same." And so continue to be that light that many of the people that come across your path need. They need to feel the love. They need to feel the compassion. They need to feel a warm embrace. They need to feel a smile. They need to feel eyes that are inviting. They need to feel everything that you already give them. And you're so effective in giving it and doing it. But how much more effective would you be if you did it from a place of wholeness? And at that, I conclude. And again, thank you for the opportunity. I hope I said something that blessed someone. You're able to take away or glean. But again, Miss Charlotte, God bless you for this opportunity. I absolutely do not take it lightly. And so thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you very much. And Amy is thanking you as well in the chat. And wow, that's an awesome testimony. I don't want to get stuck there. I could go on and on with accolades, but what I will do is there anyone here who has questions or who wants to make a comment to Mr. Green? Okay, don't everybody jump at once.
Don't be scared.
Oh, I see Warren has his hand up. Go ahead, Warren.
Brother man, brother man, brother man.
Yes,
You've
sir,
been
Mr.
through the storm. You've been through the storm beyond, beyond. And I gotta give it to you, man. Not too many people can survive what you've survived. And for that, I will gladly say this on behalf of anyone in this room. You are a great inspiration for the younger generation coming up, bro. Keep doing what you do. You hear me? You keep doing what you do and don't stop.
Yes, sir. To God be the glory.
Thank you so much, Warren, for your comments. Is there anyone else that has a question or would like to make a comment? Meredith.
First, Mr. Green, I just want to say what an amazing way you have about you in terms of sharing your story. And thank you so much for sharing a little bit or parts of your journey with us today. My question is, some people I know, some people I've worked with, I think have shared with me that this particular time of the year, there holidays that some people are celebrating in the winter months. And sometimes for some people that means, you know, or maybe in our society carries with it like the idea that you're supposed to get together with family or it's supposed to be a time of this or that. And often I think it can be a really stressful time. So I'm just curious if there anything, I don't know if that's true for you or not, but I guess to broaden the question a little bit, when there are times that are particularly stressful, like for some, the holidays, are there things that you do differently in terms of thinking about your own self-care needs and being attuned to traumas that you have experienced or any other factors that you would share that might be helpful to others on the call? And thanks so much for taking my question.
Absolutely, Meredith. Thank you for that question. There used to be a time before I came into this awareness of who I was and who I was called to serve. I self-medicated. And so realizing that that wasn't necessarily the best thing for me, now a part of my what I do that gives me the most joy, and it almost sounds so contradictory because we're talking about self-care. What brings me the most joy is when I give to others. When I can bring a smile on somebody else's face or help them out, that lifts me up into a place I'm learning to take out time, because it's hard when you're constantly giving, you're constantly doing, you constantly have a heart to serve. Sometimes it's so easy to forget about yourself. And so I date myself. I'm not waiting on anybody to say, hey, let me take you out. No, I'm going to go sit down at a nice restaurant and I'm going to enjoy myself. And I never used to be that person. And so just really learning to embrace that alone time with yourself and really listening to that internal instinct that you have, that's paramount. I never did that before, but I absolutely date myself. I absolutely still do things for others, but just finding healthy ways to balance this thing called life. And I love my family, but I'm like, I'm not spending the holidays with you. I'm going to go spend it with another family who may not necessarily have the love that my family has, but just go over there and just be that person to really kind of wrap my arms around and make them laugh, all that other kind of good stuff, even though it's a joyous occasion. But I'm just really learning to appreciate my solitude, if that makes sense. And hopefully that answered your question, Meredith.
For the question, Valerie, did you have a comment? Question?
No, not right now.
All right. Well, I have had the pleasure of knowing Mr. Green for about 12 years. And when I met him, all of the passion that he had, that he directed toward homelessness. And I just would like to speak a little bit to the part where he told you about when he kind of briefly scraped over what he did when he was out transforming lives. Mr. Green actually found a huge church venue, and it's the same place that Houston uses for Operation ID. They let him use the big chapel part of the church, and he presents a fashion show annually, is what he was doing. And Dress Like Me was where he went on the streets of Houston to the homeless community, found some people, some in which cases had never wore formal clothing or suits for guys, what have you, in their whole entire life. He got upscale people who owned boutiques to donate their clothes for these people to model them in. He got cosmetologists to do both makeup and hair and everything. And Dress Like Me was a grand gala that spotlighted the homeless community, but not only that, for them to have that moment, that spotlight. And it was done at this time of the year. So
It was.
So I'm thinking that he's probably missing that right now, but I know that that was one of the things that he really didn't go into details with you guys. That was a part of his self-care regimen. And he truly is a giver of self when he says that that's how he finds, but to be self-sacrificial to the point that you go out and become the object of your passion just kind of speaks to the dedication that he had and still continues to have in every facet of his life that he has given. And he wants, his aspiration ultimately is to have a transitional living center for the homeless. So we wish him the very best in his endeavors. We trust that all things will work out with his housing situation. And we thank you again, Al, for being your transparency and giving of yourself. Thank you.
Thank
Now
you
I
so
turn
much.
it over. Now I turn it over to Miss Valerie Dow.
And thank you, Al. That was just amazing. And I'm still trying to take it all in. But our next speaker is Dave Elkins. Dave and I, oh my God, I don't know how long we've been working together. But Dave, I know he sent me his bio, so I'm just going to go with what I know about Dave. Dave is the program director of the Jimmy Heath House, and the Jimmy Heath House is for chronic homeless individuals. And when I say Dave has the compassion, it takes a lot to work there. And to just see him in that element, in the work that he do with these individuals, these are the ones who say, they said, let them die on the street. Oh, they ain't gonna never be nothing. Those are the individuals that he worked with, who come in who are still using and don't have to stop using. They could continue to drink. And that is the population of people he works with every day. And I'm not going to tell his story. I'm going to let him tell it. And I'll talk to you again at 6 o'clock, Dave. Go ahead.
All right, folks. I'm David Elkins. Kind of frustrated with Valerie for putting me on after Mr. Green because he is a hard guy to follow. But I'm going to do my best. So I'm the program coordinator at a place called the Jimmy Heath House, and as Valerie described, it's a spot for chronically homeless individuals. It's a housing first model, and it's based on harm reduction philosophy. And so when we started, we worked with people who had been in the revolving door of these services for 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. The subject of a lot of systemic violence, people who had been told, as Valerie described, that they were never going to be successful, that they couldn't be housed. And none of that was true. And so I was basically gifted with the opportunity to put keys in the hands of these people, and through the healthcare for the homeless, provide them with healthcare. And now we have nursing students who come and care for folks. We have in-house case management. We have Dr. Kiesler, who comes twice a month. And people can regain their lives, and they can regain stability, and they can regain dignity, because they never really lost dignity. It was taken from them by systems that claim to serve them and don't. And I was fortunate enough to just be put in this position to offer people kindness and a roof over their head. And so I think that I was asked to talk about self-care because we are at the intersection of systemic violence, and people with really limited decisions, almost sometimes no good decisions. And so there are deaths here. There is sometimes a little bit of violence, but mainly what we have are people who have fallen through the cracks. And so I manage a staff of 7 people, and then I work with a couple of case managers. And really what I try to do, like the term self-care for me is, I don't really like that term, because it implies that nobody else is going to care for you. And so you better take care of yourself. And for me, that implies neglect. So for my staff, I want them to know that they're cared for, and so that they can support and care for other people. So I'm interested in creating an environment where everyone is cared for, not just clients, but staff. I think that people imagine that working with these folks is more traumatic than it is. I think that in my history here, it's resilience that we see. It's resilience that we find in ourselves and in other people. And that is despite these situations that people find themselves in. So I want to talk a little bit about like kind of interpersonal trauma and care, and kind of structural trauma and care. So like there's a front desk here. There's 7 staff people who are here 24 hours a day. There's 25 residents, and then another about 70 in the community who use this as kind of a resource hub. And so the staff are here to support clients. They're not here to police clients. They're not here to tell clients what to do. They're here to be here when folks need help. Sometimes it's as simple as being up in the middle of the night and listening to somebody's story. Sometimes it's calling an ambulance. Sometimes it's noticing, hey, this guy's ankles are swollen. He's got edema. We need to call an ambulance. And there's times where you have to kind of sit with other people's pain. And that's a hard gig. But if people feel supported, they're able to give more to the clients. And so what I try to do is help the residents and the staff feel supported and feel stable and take care of themselves. So one of the things we do here is, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, is emotional intelligence training. We train all the staff to use the mood meter. There's a mood meter in the office. So one of the ways for me to avoid trauma and the need for self-care is to know how you feel, and to be able to put a name on how you feel when you come to work every day. So I want the staff to look at this thing and say, yeah, today I'm not in the greatest mood. Maybe I don't need to be overly assertive. Maybe I just need to sit back and let things kind of unwind naturally. Or there's times where they're very eager to engage clients. And so, like, be aware, be self-aware of your own emotional state when you come to work is one way to avoid the need for self-care. Stigma plays a lot of role in the lives of these people. And a lot of times, the trauma that the staff are exposed to, they can't even share it with other people because the behaviors of these people, even though it's not particularly wild, it's stigmatized. If we have an overdose here, it's like, oh no, there was an overdose here. No, like, this is a risk we take when we come up beside people who are actively using, and it's going to happen. And sometimes if you're offering people who are using a home, they're going to die in that home. Now, what happens a lot is that then the staff begin to question, did we do the right thing? Is this the right thing to do? One year we had 5 deaths in about 3 months. And only one of them was drug related. One was a guy who left a nursing home when he shouldn't have. One guy fell and hit his head. It was that one guy walked out into traffic. It was tremendous. People were seeing ghosts in the building. And they were focused on the way these people died. And I said, you're looking at the wrong thing. You got to look at all the opportunities they were given and how long they lived here. And the truth is that they lived here a long time and they had every opportunity to make a change. And if they chose not to, then something else was more important to them. But you're looking at this terminal ending and thinking that everything led up to it. And that's just not the case. But people take this home with them and they fester on it, they perseverate on it, and it's not healthy. But you have to contextualize all this stuff and help them understand. Like, I keep pictures of camps in my office, and occasionally I'll just leave them in the office so people can see what the alternative to the Jimmy Heath House is. Because the alternative, and Valerie knows this, was camps, and these were really rough living, and big camps. When we started, there were 30 or 40 people in a camp, and they were at the courthouse. They were at down by the railroad tracks, all over the place. And so even if we can't totally turn somebody around, we can improve their situation. And you have to keep staff understanding that what we're doing is such an improvement. Now, the other thing, besides the kind of interpersonal trauma that staff experience, is almost everybody I know who does harm reduction is doing it because the system is inadequate. The systems that try to meet the, I don't even know whether they try to meet the needs of these people, are inadequate. And so people who do harm reduction tend to step in and say, I'll show up with the clean syringes. I'll show up with the condoms. I'll show up with the HIV test. I'll put a table out here. I think, Mr. Green was talking about this kind of work, this kind of like between the cracks kind of work. And when you step into that gulf, you're in for a pounding, frankly. The system is not always built to meet the needs of these people. And so as somebody who practices harm reduction, you're stepping into a gulf and you're going to be stretched. And that stretch is often uncomfortable. It's often reminds you of all the inadequacies that exist for our clients and for ourselves. And so, and then there's like, well, there's what you want to call like a moral injury. that can occur when you know that you're part of a system that isn't always just, that isn't always fair, that isn't always kind. And you also know that if you want any resources, you're going to have to be part of that system. If you want any resources to provide food for someone or to provide housing for someone, you're going to have to accept a little bit of this moral injury and decide where it is. And a lot of people get bogged down in that conundrum of like, well, I could stay kind of pure, but I don't have any resources, or I can step into the belly of the beast. And guess what? Now I have the money I need to do what I want to do, but I'm compromised in some ways. And so we have to navigate that. And that's exhausting. And there again, like, you need to care for yourself and to really step back. Like, I think about movies and I think about the close-up shot, the bigger scene, and then the wide angle. And sometimes we get focused on the close-up, and we don't know how to back it off and say, okay, in the bigger picture, this is better. In the bigger picture, this is healthier. In the bigger picture, this is a bridge to something else. And so part of how I see my job is to be there for the direct service staff, and I'm actually pretty direct service myself, so that I can remind them of this, because they get bogged down and dispirited, and it's natural. Like, I get it too, but I think also that we have to do this work, and we're drawn to this work. And I think probably everybody on this call is drawn into a situation that maybe is sometimes exhausting. I think that when we try to do the right thing, we're often met with a stone wall. And that is not, I mean, I think it comes with the territory, frankly. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. But I think that, when we talk about self-care, and again, like, I'm not, the opposite of self-care is neglect. I think the things that I think about are supervision is one. Like, I need supervision. I need support from the person above me. I need to understand what it is they expect, where the guardrails are. And I owe that to my staff as well, that they're not on their own, that they know that there is a structure around them that is protective of them, that is supportive of them, that they can come to, and with that emotional intelligence, like, I love my clients. My clients don't always love me. They don't always love the front desk. They're not always having a great day, and they can be quite mean sometimes. And so the staff need to be able to come to me and say, I didn't like this. Or the tenants need to come to me and say, I didn't like. Usually it's both parties coming to me and saying, I wasn't happy with this interaction. But you have to be honest, and the staff tend to be braver than they should be. They don't want to admit that something hurt their feelings. They don't want to admit that they're angry. But if you want them to maintain unconditional positive regard, the first thing they have to do is be honest and vent some of that and get it out of them. And then let's figure out how to make this a better relationship. The other thing that I think is really important in self-care is that it isn't going home, turning on the TV and sitting and trying to just do nothing. That it has to be an activity. It has to be something you do that allows you to concentrate on something else, that gets you out of intrusive. How many people on this call, you can raise your hands, think about work when they're not at work? Yeah, everybody. How many people feel like it's intrusive when you're having dinner with your partner and you're thinking about a client, or you're thinking about a budget, or, you know, like these things that kind of creep, that's, you know, burnout starting to creep in. And the best medicine for that is activity. It can't just be like, yeah, like, I'll be honest, like, it's hard to fight that feeling of like, I just need to go home and close my eyes and stare at Frasier, you know, or something that's like mind numbing, because it's overwhelming. And yet what I know is that if I go home and I work in the garden, or I play with my daughter, or I go for a walk, or I do something that gets my body moving, I feel better. Just sitting, it doesn't work. But I think that we just reach a point where we're, you know, as a trauma response, one of them is freezing, right? We just freeze up. So, you know, I think that the other thing I encourage people to do is to take breaks. You know, like, not every day is the same day at the Jimmy Heath House. If we have a slow day, don't find something to do. Just have a slow day. You know, take a breather. The work that I'm sure everyone on this call does is extreme. Like, if you sat down and you explained it to someone who's working in an office, they'd be like, I can't believe you do that. I can't believe that's what you do every day. And yet for us, there's like this kind of bravery and this nonchalance. And then we end up with a heart attack at 50, or we end up like, you know, weeping over our eggs in the morning or something like that. And it's because what we witness is cruelty sometimes. It's injustice. And we step into that over and over and over again. You know, I had a client who, it's Christmas time, you know, she'd been on probation for so long they couldn't even remember what she had done. And they kept her on probation because she would never pee clean. So the judge, right about now, I think it's about 3 years ago, said, I'm going to put you in jail over Christmas, and you're going to detox in jail over Christmas. And that'll be your punishment. And everybody knew, like, even her PO was like, yeah, this isn't a good idea. And about a week after she got out of jail, she overdosed because her tolerance was gone. And so, you know, basically it was a life sentence for peeing dirty. And I think that when you're exposed to, like, we learn truths about the system that no one should know, right? I think we all know things about how hospitals work and how jails work and how social service systems work that we probably didn't ask to know and would rather not know. And once we know it, we feel we have to do something about it. I mean, that's how I got into it, was I just couldn't stand that they blamed clients anymore. You know, every failing of the system is heaped upon the client. And so I felt obliged. But, you know, I urge you folks, healthcare for the homeless, I'm coming to the end of my half an hour, has been, for me and this building, it's kept people alive. It's a doctor that comes and visits, does home visits, adjusts medication on the fly, gets people into the hospital, gets us past the EMTs or the police who are like, yeah, he doesn't need to go, you know, all this stuff. And all of that comes at a price as far as our well-being. And yet we can't get away from it either. And so I just appreciate being able to blather on for half an hour and to share these few perspectives with you, and just to appreciate healthcare for the homeless for what it is, which is life-saving to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Hey, Charlotte.
So,
So now we're gonna just open up the floor. I need to take a break.
okay. Okay, for everyone, is there anyone here who has questions or would like to make a comment as in regards to Mr. Elkins' perspective and what he shared with us? Somebody like to ask the question? Amy?
I'd just like to thank you for what you do. It's not easy, like you said, but it's so needed. Some people just need someone to listen to them, to have a space, to feel safe to do that. And harm reduction is an amazing model for people to make change if they choose to do that. So I really appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you, Amy. I think that what harm reduction does is buys people time. And I think, you know, part of the systemic violence is the timeframes we offer people are just so unrealistic for the changes that they need to make. And that's the one thing I can buy them here is we're not going to evict you. You're not going back to the street. You've got time to figure this out however you want to figure it out. And you've got the ability to fail without failing, without losing everything. You can, you know, drop the ball. You cannot pay rent. You can get in a fight. We're going to keep you housed until you figure it out. And that's, you know, they do the work. I
Yeah.
don't. I don't do the work. I just give them the opportunity to do the work.
I think the key is it's done without judgment, right? And you put that in their hands.
Well, and the challenge is, like, I call this harm reduction island because they're in a sea of criminality and the justice system and abstinence only. Here, safety is my chief concern. Here is, you know, here's your Narcan. We have Narcan. You know, I should make it clear, like, we've resuscitated far more people than have died here. Most of them die of old age, and, you know, this is healthcare for the homeless. It's chronic illness that really takes them out. But yeah, I mean, I think that they live with so much implied judgment already. So many people, they internalize these ideas that are so stigmatizing that it's hard to break them out of it.
You. Myra?
Well, I was going to talk about something else, but all you just said is like touching. So I'm at Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. They have their healthcare for the homeless clinic here, but their building is kind of like what you're saying, kind of like harm reduction. It has they don't kick you out just because you're using, but it's not up to that model because I think they're, I'm not gonna say their mission, but just by their actions, it seems like their mission is to get your house and keep you housed, because that's more important than you go on the streets. That's why they have a rehab facility, and it takes so many people so long before they're kicked out. They have to be doing the extreme before they kicked out. But you know, with this fentanyl, I keep going back and forth. I talked with Valerie once about it. I keep going back and forth. I want to separate the unhoused from the users, and it's still in my head that I shouldn't be separating, because you see all the stuff happening and I still care for them. You know, I try to give them a chance and try to talk to them and what have you, but it's still hard when it's happening and it's causing problems in where I live, which I'm living in one of those type of buildings. But I try to do most of my advocating somewhere else. I have different options for my self-care, my sewing, and my art. It's great self-care, except sometimes I forget to eat while I'm doing those things because I'm so caught up in that. But yeah, I just think harm reduction is the best solution for people instead of trying to force them to stop. I just had an incident happen. I'm on the bus, and then this lady's trying to get her boyfriend, and he's must have just hit one before they got on the bus, and then he's just standing there, but he's standing there, and then he won't come up. He won't go to the pole to get off the bus, and she's trying to pull him, and so the bus driver stops, and then we're stuck, and then he starts falling down a little bit, but he's not on the ground, and she thinks he's overdosing, and she tries to give the Narcan to somebody else to adhere it, and that lady doesn't know, so she in the air. So I'm like traumatized from this thing. Like, is he overdosing? Is he not? But it's sad because I would rather have him okay. They called the ambulance and then the bus took off. But I'd rather him be okay. But it's hard out there caring for people, even in the state that they're in now. This new drug system is different from what we've used to, but I would rather them get housed, get Narcan, have harm reduction as a model, instead of them being stuck on the streets, no solution. And here it's winter. It's probably going to snow right now. You can see it's dark in here. That's only because the sky is white for snow. And so I don't even want them on the streets. I would rather them come in here and sleep in our building, as long as they don't use, but sleep in the building in the hallways, than to have them in the street freezing. So thanks for letting me speak. And thanks for your contribution.
Myra, you're absolutely right. Like, you have to weigh what the other choices are. And for most of my clients, the other choice is under a bridge. And this is just not acceptable. And I do think that, I have yet to work with anybody who at some point during the day, during the week, didn't say, I wish I could get out of this. I wish I could stop this. But most of them don't have all the other pieces in place to really feel like they can do that. And so for me, until they're ready, I want them to be safe. And if I have to make some compromises as the supposed well person or the person representing these systems in order to accommodate, I think one of the problems is we try to force people to accommodate a system rather than really pushing a system to accommodate the needs of the people who really have the needs. And, like, I want people, if they're going to use, I want them to have their friends there because I know that they're safer. If they're going to use, if in this building, if you come in and you tell the front desk, hey, I just scored something, I'm not sure I'm safe, can you come and check on me? We'll come and check on you in 10 minutes and make sure you answer the door, and we'll come back. And the thing is that, like, this building also probably sends the most people of any program in Cincinnati to treatment. They go to treatment all the time. But it's not like treatment works the same for everybody. And usually that's part of their problem, is they're led to believe that they've failed treatment. And they didn't fail treatment. Treatment didn't work for them. Okay, that's not a death sentence. So I think, the nice thing about the position I was given is I'm allowed to tap into my compassion and my kindness and actualize it. I'm lucky, like, this job's, it's given me more than it's taken. It's taken quite a bit, but it's actually given me more.
So much. I recognize Al.
Yes, thank you, Charlotte. Mr. Elkins, I really, really enjoyed your presentation. When you said 24/7, that really caused my spirit to leap, because when I mentioned that to people, they were like, oh, you're crazy. No, the issue is, the clients are on the streets 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, while most of the organizations that serve are closing at 5 or their cutoff is at 3. And so if permitted, I would love just to speak with you outside of this, because I really believe that there's so much information that you could share if you're willing to help me.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. Like, most of the life that goes on here, is at night. Like, it's people it's a 24-hour situation. And a lot of folks, that's when they're kind of waking up and getting moving, is at night. And, you know, like, I think that one of the things, I work for a community organization, and community is important to us. And I don't set the standard here. The community sets the standard here. And they're the ones who make this functional, the residents. And they set what's going to happen. There's no way that my little staff and myself and the case managers could corral and control and mandate anything here if the tenants didn't accept that and didn't want that. And what I find is that people respond to stability, even if they're still using drugs, even if they're still doing sex work, even if they're still, you know, out cutting catalytic converters off at night. They respond to stability, and over time that stability grows, and you have to give them time for it to grow. Yeah, just get a hold of Valerie and she can pass along my contact information.
Okay, thank you.
Questions for either one of our wonderful presenters on today? Val?
Oh, girl, I'm full.
Okay.
What can I say about Dave? But I'm gonna tell you something where Dave helped me. Wait a minute, let me try to. I'm trying to close my. Why did I open it up? Oh well, it's froze. Wait a minute.
Okay, Valerie's making some
I'm trying to, yeah. Technical difficulties. So one of the things that Dave helped me to understand, because he knows that I'm in recovery, and he helped me to understand the difference between harm reduction and abstinence only, because I just couldn't get it. And I sat down with him one day and he told me again, and the light bulb came on. So when I look at harm reduction, because of the work that I do, I'm always passing out condoms. I got a trunk full of condoms. And right now, hand warmers, those are harm reduction. And I just couldn't get it then. But once he set me down, this was about 3 or 4 months ago, and he had to tell me, well, Valerie, everybody is not going to get it like you got. You're abstinence only. And so, yeah. See how he talked to me? And I was traumatized.
So was I. Well, you know, I tell people that harm reduction is to abstinence as the Heimlich maneuver is to a diet. You know, like you wouldn't tell somebody who was choking, hey, I'm going to put you on a diet. No, like you gotta do the Heimlich. You gotta save them first, right? And that's the only difference. It's just a means to an end. I think most of my clients, if abstinence just happened to them, if they could just have it lifted off of them, I can't tell you how many of them have said, you know, I'm tired of this. I've watched people, you know, unto death. And that's not something they want. Some of them give up and they're like, yeah, this is how I'm going to die. But really, most of them just are tired of struggling. And they just, it's like, if I could have this lifted off of me, I would. They don't want Suboxone, most of them, because the withdrawal from Suboxone is worse than the withdrawal from fentanyl. You know, it's such, you know, we could do a lot as a community to take the chaos out of drug use. and to allow people the dignity while they're using that. Like, I can go to a bar anytime, put my money on the table, they'll hand me something that's intoxicating, that is going to lead me to behave in a dysregulated way, maybe. And I can do that all night and it's not a problem. But if I'm a heroin user or a meth user or a crack cocaine user, I can't have the dignity of going somewhere and putting my money on the table and having a safe substance that I can access. And so for me, the next step is safe injection, it's safe consumption, where people are able, until they're ready to quit, to not kill themselves. And I don't really care if it makes other people uncomfortable. You know, their discomfort is nothing compared with the, people having to go out and do sex work because they can't get what they need, or go out and break into cars and then have to, walk down an alley with somebody they don't know to try to get what they need. And so we have the power to change that, and we just won't do it. Like the xylazine in the drug supply now. Like, nobody asked all these people using heroin if they wanted xylazine in their drug supply. In Canada, they consider it poison. They have safe supply because they think fentanyl's poison. But we won't give people that opportunity. And then we blame them when they overdose on fentanyl. I just don't think that, it just don't seem fair to me.
So
Hey,
I do. Who got a question? Amy?
Warren has his hand.
Yeah, go ahead.
Warren, do
Warren,
you have a question?
okay, Valerie, we'll wait.
Yeah.
Warren
So Dave, in that kind of environment when everything is like on high alert, how do you regulate your staff? Okay, between the 1st and the 5th of the month, we already know there's a lot of moving around, a lot of moving parts. But how do you regulate your staff where they're looking at that chart that you have up there,
Well,
and knowing and trying to regulate how they really feel?
The first thing is, I acknowledge that, like, what you see in residential is that really it's about 5 days before the check hits, people start to get anxious, they start to stress, they're making financial arrangements based on money they don't have. And then the first hits, and from the 1st to the 10th, it used to be more chaotic. Now, I'll be honest with you, like alcohol, in my perspective, of all the drugs that people do, alcohol is really one of the most challenging because it has, like, you never know where somebody's going. Most of these folks are doing the same thing every day. They're trying to stay well. For me, addiction is not about the substance, it's about the lack of the substance. And so, like, if the money hits, what we do is we dial back the rules a little bit. We make a little buffer cushion kind of around ourselves in the building, and we accept it. Like, hey, it's the 1st of the month. People are going to act a little bit different, and we roll with it. I mean, I wish it was, I had some kind of dynamic plan, but it's not like that. Like, we just know what's going to happen, and we prepare for it. And, like, I don't enforce the rules all the time. The rules are here when I need them, but I also look at, like, the real consequence of somebody violating a rule. And if it hasn't hurt anybody, and it hasn't changed anything, then maybe I'm going to say something to the person. Like we try to get people to come in through the front door because it's safer for them and it's safer for us, because what they tend to do is they prop the back door open and then anybody slip in. So we like them to use the front door. But I also know there's a couple of people in here that owe people money. And so they're tipping out the back door so that the fellas on the corner don't see him. And so am I going to really come down hard on that person? No, because they haven't really done anything. I'm going to say, could you close the door? Could you, like it's the infraction is minuscule compared with what would happen to him if the guy he owes $100 to sees him, who's going to light him up like a candle. So like, I'm number one, I'm not going to convince him that it's better to go out the front way if somebody's waiting for him. So I'm not going to waste my breath. Eventually, most people decide to follow the rules, and they decide it's in their best interest. And occasionally, I like to break the rules. I like special treatment. I occasionally want grace. So why wouldn't I give that to somebody else? And so, yeah, first of the month, we just kind of like, okay, this person's intoxicated. I had a guy here, he's got payee, and every time he goes to the payee, he shows up with a fifth or a half gallon of vodka, and we just let him sit in the lobby and he'll scream, holler for a little while, and then he'll head back to his apartment. Now, what happened the other day is one of the other tenants got sick of it and called the cops on him. Well, okay, if like that's a real consequence in any apartment of making too much noise. But really, the cops didn't do anything. And that's the other thing to understand, is that mainly the cops don't want to bother with these folks either. They don't want to be bothered. So where really is the infraction is often my response.
Well, but what I see you doing is putting something in place for staff, and it's really part of self-care.
Yeah.
That barrier that you're putting is, come on, you all, this is a time we can relax, breathe, don't even worry about it.
What I do with the staff is I try to cross all the shifts. So we work 8 to 4, 4 to midnight, and midnight to 8. And so I come in a little bit early and see the third shift person, and I stay until the second shift person is on. So I see everybody, and I know about their lives, and I know their struggles, and they can tell me. And I think the biggest thing I offer them is understanding that, like, hey, you had a shitty day yesterday, and that ain't no fun. You're allowed to say that. You're allowed to breathe it. You're allowed to expel it and acknowledge it. And then generally people are like, yeah, I understand. The bigger picture is this is going to happen. But I think that it's my role to allow them the natural response of like, yeah, I didn't like it when this person yelled at me for half an hour, because part of the front desk job, it's a punching bag job. If somebody's having a bad day and they want to take it out on somebody who cannot respond, who won't go there with them. Now, the other thing I work with them on is breathing and slowing things down and de-escalation. So yeah, I didn't mention that, but like everybody who comes in, we talk all the time about de-escalation. We do de-escalation training. And that's really what I want my staff to look at, is like, okay, where are you taking the person? You can very easily do reflective listening. Just repeat back to them what they're saying, and they'll feel like they're being heard, and they'll calm down. And you can't be sarcastic, you have to be authentic, but it's a technique that really works. I have a guy here who's like, he's got a developmental delay, and he's schizophrenic, and he's substance using. But and when he gets agitated, he's quite agitated. But if you sit and go, you're feeling very agitated right now. Yeah, I'm really pissed off. It's like, you're really pissed off right now. And you just keep repeating what he says in about 10 minutes. And the other thing is, like, you can't be in a hurry. You can't rush it. You have to allow, and that's really difficult for staff because they want to get out of that, they feel it escalating. And that's when they, like the 90% of the job is sitting there watching the TV. And then 10% of it is de-escalating somebody or watching something go on. And you just have to kind of, for those 10 or 15 minutes, you're going to be on full bore. And I don't mind if you relax and read a book the rest of the time, as long as, and I also know that I don't have an answer for everything these folks dream of. And what I tell the staff is, as long as you've thought about it, we'll review it and I'll support you. Now, I may not agree with it. I may ask you to look at it this way or that way, but understand that as long as you've thought it through and it's protective of you and the client, then we won't have a problem. I'm fully in support of this. And so they know that I'll be supportive of it, I hope.
Okay. I've seen that Myra has had her hand up for quite some time waiting to speak.
Sorry, I've been jabbering.
I think Warren is ready. I can wait for Warren.
Thank you. First and foremost, brother, I commend you on what you're doing. And I wish there was a program like that when my mom was around, because as a child of a heroin addict, I watched my mother go through a lot. And as a person that was homeless once, I've never seen any program do what you do. So on behalf of myself and some of us here, and even the program that I work with here in Boston, I commend you on what you're doing. Keep doing it. And hopefully in the future, you and I can get together and conversate in person.
Thank you. There's no higher compliment, Warren. I appreciate that so much. Genuinely, like, I don't even know what to say, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, and now Myra, we're about 7 minutes out. Myra?
Okay, so what I was going to ask is, what do you think about the model of a harm reduction center having a safe place to needle use? I'm not saying that right, because they were trying to do one here at our harm reduction center. They showed a model of what it could look like. I know it's across different places across different states, but it's like a little booth. You can go in. They know you're in the booth to use. How would someone start something like that, or how would they go about it, or any information you want to provide?
Man, that's so there is a place in Southeast British Columbia called Insight. And Insight's been doing this, safe consumption sites, not just for injection drug users, but for people to smoke meth or smoke crack. And it's very effective, and they have these all over Canada. They've started, I think Ithaca, New York has done a program, like a pilot program. I know that they're trying to get one off the ground in Philadelphia as well. I think, I've argued for one here, and I go back to, like, you can go to a bar and purchase any intoxicating substance you want. A safe injection site is the only argument I've ever heard from the people in Cincinnati is like, well, these drugs are illegal. And that becomes the fallback on why people can't have a safer way to use. And I've talked to, I think that people mystify drug use and they give it, stigma, but they also kind of imagine that people project all their neurotic fears onto whoever they want to push out of the system, whether it's people of color, people doing sex work, or LGBTQ. It's like, we're going to project all our neuroses onto you folks, and then you're going to have to carry that around. And the same thing with drug users. Like, people use drugs safely at the Jimmy Heath house every day. Sometimes their friends come over and they all use together. They're even safer when that happens. And yet the sky hasn't collapsed. The building hasn't crawled. It's possible to do this. And what I think it's like they're afraid that people will become functional, because if like, I think what would be ideal for, like, I think about the women in here who do sex work to get what they need. And I think if they had a diagnosis of addiction and Medicaid would pay for 3 doses a day, and they could go to a pharmacy and get pharmaceutical grade drugs, then they would begin to have some control over their lives, because so much of what they're doing is about staying well. It's not about getting high. It's just about staying ahead of withdrawal. And they've done these exploratory programs, like I said, in Southeast British Columbia, where they give people a safe supply. And what do you know? They can go to work. They can reconnect with their families because they're not constantly in fear of what the next moment's going to be as far as their withdrawal goes. And, we put a lot of stuff into what addiction is. Addiction for me is tolerance and withdrawal. I've built up a tolerance and I need more of the substance to get the same effect. And when it's taken away from me, I go into real situations of discomfort. And the rest of it is sort of like, well, we don't like that you inject drugs, so we're going to make it ugly and dirty and unsafe. And if I make it hard enough on you, maybe you'll quit. And there's a lot of people who don't quit because it's really hard on them. They just lead really hard lives. And I just don't think it's, again, like, to me, it's a question of fairness. So yeah, I think I would look, I forget what the place in Philadelphia is called. I would look up Insight. And their model is probably the best model. They do this in Amsterdam, they do it in England, they do it in South Africa. Like, it just makes sense to allow people. There's a guy in Ireland that drives around in a van. I for a while, my plan was just to get a portalet and pay somebody to sit outside the portalet. You could go in, you could use, because they're always like, oh no, it's a portalet, people are going to use in it. Okay, well, I'll put one behind Jimmy Heath House and it'll be a safe injection site. There are people that do safe bathrooms that have timers on them, and they'll have safe supplies in the bathroom. The timer's on the door, so after 3 minutes, if you haven't come out, the timer goes off, you can come in. I think that the first thing is just humanizing drug use and drug users. And once you see them as humans, you want them to be safe. And what I can tell you is that, given some stability, like, drug use at the Jimmy Heath House isn't my biggest problem. It's a problem for the tenants, but they manage it. The biggest problem I have is high blood pressure, is diabetes, is HIV, is hepatitis, is cancer. I've had 4 clients this year die of throat cancer. That's the destabilizing thing. Like, drug use is pretty stable. if you give people the ability to be stable, but we undercut it all the time. We make it hard on them, in my book.
Thank you, Dave. Final question, we'll go to Gregory Dredd.
Thank you, Miss Charlotte. And I want to say to, I don't guess my camera is working, but I want to say to Mr. Elkins and to Mr. Green, thank you all for being so transparent in your, there's my camera, for doing this information. I've learned a lot and I've been empowered through each of you individually, yet collectively sharing about self-care and harm reduction. I really want to give a special thanks to Valerie, Charlotte, and Meredith for putting on this during this time, the holiday season. I know so many people, friends, when I was at the Star of Hope shelter here after Hurricane Harvey, that still have struggles with their families. And this is a time that sometimes triggers them to often go back into their addictive behavior because of depression, because they've destroyed those relationships. But Mr. Elkins and Mr. Green, I appreciate your foresight and insight because it's given me a way to begin to initiate conversation and be more empathetic and compassionate, because I 2 years ago had a drug addiction, but I was able to deal with mine. I didn't have to go through a bunch of hiccups and everything. But everybody, like Mr. Elkins, you said, is different. Everyone has a different process by which they get to that point of stabilization. And I really appreciate this session. I hope that you all do this session again and allow it to have some insight from many of the members here. Because my concern is also when we talk about this, Mr. Elkins and Mr. Green, Miss Charlotte, Miss Valerie Dow, you both are leaders within the healthcare. But how do you all deal with your self-care? How do you all deal with harm reduction? I think that is something that is very relevant to this conversation, because many of the people you deal with, you all are either mentoring those individuals or you're speaking to large masses of people. And I think your stories play a very pivotal role in this as well. So I just wanted to share and say kudos to all of you for this great work. And thank you for putting on this session.
Thank you so much. Valerie, do you want to comment to Gregory?
No, we have went over time. And I
Okay.
just want to thank everyone who participated, everyone who attend. You have given Charlotte and I something to think about in moving what it's going to look like for 2024. You know, around community conversations. I mean, this was a wealth of information today. And once again, Alfred, just thank you. Thank you. And Dave, you know, I love you.
Yeah, I'll see you around, Valerie.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. It's been an honor.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here, and we appreciate your input, your presence. And the last word will go to our community engagement manager, Miss Meredith.
I just want to say what an incredible group of people. It has been a wonderful hour and a half. I really feel grateful to have spent this time with all of you. Thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you, Mr. Elkins. Looks like he had to hop off for your time and your stories and sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and your experience. I just feel really grateful to have met you and listened to you. And thank you for all of our community members. Few of you I haven't seen in a while, Gregory and Myra. It's wonderful to see you up on the screen. And a huge, certainly last but certainly not least, to Charlotte and Val. Thank you so much for planning such a wonderful event. All the credit goes to Charlotte and Valerie. So thank you. And I feel really grateful for you all. So take care, and I hope everyone has happy holidays.
Thanks,
Thank you, and
Meredith.
thank you,
Thanks,
John.
everyone. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.